Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Horror Trans. My name is Stephanie Bree. I am a transgender woman who talks about all things horror. And today I'm reviewing It, the remake. And I'm lumping them together. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 is one movie because it's one story. And just like the original one, the miniseries from the 90s, it's intended to be viewed as a single story. So you watch both movies in one viewing. I know that's not how they were released, so there was some time between the two. But it is one continuous story, so I'm counting it as one continuous movie. And this movie is fucked up. So if you thought the Tim Curry It was scary, then be leery of this movie because this one is at least 3 to 4 times as scary than that one. I almost had a panic attack watching It Chapter 1 when the kids were in the house. So that is some pretty intense imagery. Now, I have read the book and I have watched the Tim Curry um, miniseries, which I've already reviewed on this channel. I love it. I love Tim Curry, so I'm good. I'm biased. I'm a trans woman, so obviously I love Tim Curry. Um, but you know what? This movie's fucking great. These two movies back to back, and I'm just calling it one movie, even though it's technically two movies, but it's Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, so I'm calling it one movie. Both of these movies, they're just fucking awesome. Now, just like in the miniseries, I do happen to prefer the first part, the kid stuff, to the adult stuff. But they actually do a really good job keeping you interested in the adult stuff with these movies. Whereas the miniseries, it kind of gets a little boring with the adult stuff, I'll be honest. Now, there are a lot of throwbacks in this series to the mini series, which lifelong fans will appreciate. But they do take some liberties and make some changes from the miniseries as well as changing things from the book. So kudos for that. Because even though I'm calling it a remake, it's technically a reinterpretation. It's just like another adaptation of the same book. Just like, The Thing was a separate adaptation of the original book that A Thing from Another World was based on. But for simplicity's sake, we still call it a remake, because it's just easier to process for some people. So I still stand by my statement that it's a remake, even though it's technically just a reinterpretation. Now, unlike the miniseries, which was made for TV, this movie it has more in common with the book in that it is decidedly rated R. It has some F bombs of two varieties, fuck, as well as the other F word that we try not to say unless you are gay. In which case it's up to you, but it is a gay slur, so we avoid it. They also have a ton of profanity, some really creepy, almost sex scenes, which are actually creepier. The sexual assault in this movie, or near sexual assault, I should say, is creepier than in the original because it's a little more obvious and overt. But it's also gorier than the original, considerably gorier, and I would say considerably scarier. Although, I'm scared of clowns anyways, and the Tim Curry clown, was still pretty scary when I was a kid. First time I watched it, I was terrified. Um, this movie definitely has some Stranger Things vibes, and I don't know when Stranger Things first aired. I do know Chapter 1 of It came out in 2017. I don't know if that's before Stranger Things or not. So I don't know if this was going for a Stranger Things vibe or if Stranger Things was possibly inspired by this movie. But they definitely influenced each other or at least have similar vibes one way or the other. Which I like because I love Stranger Things. So a couple of things I want to talk about in this movie that are different from the book because they also weren't tackled in the original movie, the Tim Curry miniseries, and that's the depiction of the ritual of Chud, which in the miniseries was kind of, I don't know, like a throwaway, I guess. It wasn't even important. I don't even remember if it was even in the movie or not, to be honest. In the remake, I'm going to just say this one that we're talking about. Um, it's kind of based on a Native American ritual that is by a made up Native American tribe for this movie. Stephen King does often draw on Native American mythology in his movies, specifically the Wendigo in Pet Cemetery, and as well as the Native American burial ground that the Shining Hotel was allegedly, supposedly built upon. And there are other references to Native American mythology in his books and movies and things. So it's understandable that he's going to go that route. Now, in the book, the kids fuck the girl. That's the ritual of Chud. They all have to lose their virginity and bond sexually with the girl in the group to become adults so that they can overcome their fear, I guess. A lot of people have a problem with that because it's children, literal children having sex, actual real adult sex, and not teenagers, which, you know, happens in horror movies. We're talking 12 and 13-year-olds. We're talking kids here, not, you know, adolescents. So that's problematic. So I'm at least glad, me personally, that they didn't go that route in the movie. I know some people were disappointed because I guess they wanted to see little kids fuck, which I do not want to see. Thank you very much. Especially, well, I would assume they don't show anything even if they go that route. But, you know, come on, Stephen King. What the fuck kind of crack were you on? Was it, like, tainted? Was it, you know, I don't know, whatever. He was obviously on cocaine when he wrote most of his books in the 80s. He has actually gone on record as saying this. I'm not like, you know, making fun of him or making accusations. He has admitted to being on cocaine when he wrote most of this shit. So, you know, I don't know where he got the idea to have 12-year-olds fuck, but it makes me suspicious of him, I guess. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. The other thing I wanted to point out that happens in the movies, or excuse me, in the book, that is not in either of the movies, that I'm glad wasn't in either of the movies, is the bully blowjob scene in the junkyard, I guess, which I'm glad wasn't in the movie because that was also problematic because he's basically forcing his friend to give him a blowjob, and that was just like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Anyways, so the overt sexual stuff is thankfully missing from these movies. But I wanted to talk about it because, you know, if you've never read the book, you should know this stuff is in the book. So you can decide not to read it or read it at your own risk. Because the book is fucked up. First time I read the book, I threw it. I literally threw it in the trash. I was like, never again. I'm not reading this shit again. Not because it disturbed me, but because it was, Jesus Christ, it was so fucking terrifying. I was like, no, never, ever again. I am not going to subject my psyche to the horrors of that book because it is probably the second scariest book I've ever read in my life. I'm not going to spoil what was the scariest book I've ever read because I'll save that for the video when I review that movie because it's coming. It's on the list. Because books can be scarier in a different way than movies because you can actually see it all in your mind in a book, whereas in a movie, you're seeing somebody else's interpretation. So it's kind of dependent upon what actually scares you. I'm glad that this movie takes the source material a little more seriously than the Tim Currey, which is what I'm going to refer to it as, miniseries. Because the made-for-TV miniseries went a little too cheeseball for me. I enjoy it because nostalgia, obviously. And I do like B-movies and cheesy stuff, and I love Tim Curry. And he is like a god among B-movie horror icons, you know. Because he makes some of the best B-movies in existence. But he's also a legit, like, phenomenal force in Hollywood. He's a damn good character actor. And I'll watch anything he's in. And yes, as a queer woman, I 1,000% love Rocky Horror Picture Show. so fucking much. But I've already talked about that. I've already reviewed it. So yeah, my recommendation is clearly a buy on both chapters. Absolutely, you like need these movies in your collection. I recommend getting the director's cut if you can, or the special editions if you can, because you get more gore and more character development and backstory. But if you're going to settle for the theatrical cut, you're doing good too, because the theatrical cuts are damn good movies. I would go so far as to say that not only is this the best out of all the Stephen King remakes, the modern remakes that we've been getting the past few years, this is absolutely the best anything we've seen by Stephen King on film. The possible exception, the only other Stephen King adaptation that comes close to this I haven't talked about yet is Rose Red. But I'm not ready to talk about Rose Red. And that's partially because if you follow my channel, you know haunted house stuff scares me more than just about anything. And even though that was a mini series, not a movie, it scared the living fucking daylights out of me. So I'm not ready to talk about it because I kind of want to rewatch it before I review it, so I can like dig into it a little better. But that's coming down the road. But yes, I think this is the best. At least also, I'll say this: these two movies, if you watch them as one movie, is the best film adaptation of anything Stephen King has ever done. Television adaptation, Rose Red is the best television adaptation of anything Stephen King. So I'd have to rewatch Rose Red before I can decide of the two which one is superior. Right now, I'm just going to say this is the best thing I've ever seen by Stephen King in film, but probably overall. Stay cool.